And we are live. Thank you so much for joining us.
No, I Won't Settle. Read by the author Sherelle Omiinka Bidiako Garth. No, I won't settle. No, will I be brought. Not after all the lessons that I've been taught. Lessons of how people can push your backs against the wall and harassing you until you fall, trying to make you feel unfit to run an operation that was never legit. No, I won't settle. Nor will I be brought. Not after all the lessons that I have been taught. The lessons in dedication and commitment that are paid with a price in exchange for avoiding a long drawn out fight. Coveting the possessions of others. It's more than a sin. No, you can't win. It will only get you bypass jail and straight to hell. And those who participate in it don't seem to seldom fare well. No, I won't settle. Nor will I be brought. Not after all the lessons that I've been taught. The lessons in how hands can become tied, making an organization result to losing their pride, conspiring a crime, working up plans like this can only get you time, plotting schemes to lay hold and blame will only get you caught up into the heat of the flame, while screaming out it's a low-down dirty shame. No, I won't settle, nor will I be brought, not after all the lessons that I have been taught. Lessons of how time can be recaptured, nor can it be replaced with money. It could never be erased. To the human race, it's a disgrace and such a waste. No, I won't settle, nor will I be brought, not after all the lessons that I have been taught. Lessons in lies and how people use them to reprise. Those who invest in them can make them thrive and survive and somehow stay alive. The real lesson is first you receive the lesson, then you get the teaching, and somewhere in between there is the preaching. I don't want to leave you with the impression that I've settled, nor that I've been brought and forgotten all the lessons that I have been taught.
Hold on. Thank you so much for joining me on part 2. We did not get a chance to do the remaining portion of the agenda for the Black, the African Americans. And I wanted to cover reparation, and I want to talk a little bit about forgiveness of taxes. If we are to look at accommodating the Blacks and their agenda, which I'm sure we will be looking at our agenda for voting as well, so I'll be discussing that as well. Why don't I go ahead and discuss the reparation first, and then we'll talk about our agenda for voting for the Black agenda. The reparation discussion has been going on for some time now, and they've been in and out of court to look at some of the treaties that were broken. I believe if we address the treaties that were broken, like the 1865, that would be one of the treaties that we could look at. And then we could look at appealing the treaties. And then everything that's in that treaty we can address to accommodate, such as the 40 acres of land and the $150 times XYZ. It's no longer $150. But we certainly need to look at that because there is a list of all of the constituents that have received their reparation without any questions asked, hands down. But for some reason, when it comes to talking about giving reparation for the African American, there is a distortion of how do we do that. Well, I'll tell you how. Now, as I indicated, these views do not express the views of the radio station of Spreaker at all. They're coming from Omiinka. And we're talking about the Black agenda here. And we have been talking about it all day. And we need to put an agenda together so that we can know exactly what we're asking for. And I'm going to tell you what the people want, the black people want, the African American, the indigenous people. Well, when you look at the agenda for the reparation, it's easy to go back and look at the major corporations that benefited from slavery, from the production of slavery to developing the farms, as well as growing cotton, which is very, very easy to trace back the cotton and to multiply what is owed. Not to mention the banks that our ancestors put their money in. They never retrieved their money, let alone the interest on it. Those names of the family member are actually recorded somewhere within the records. And they can easily be found, the names of the family members who actually made deposits in the bank. Even after they were trying to recoup the bank, save the bank, Frederick Douglass put his $10,000 in to no avail. The bank still failed. So that money went up in smoke. But contrary, my friend, they can be retrieved. And all of those family members whose names are on those receipts and deposits can be ravished, and they can be adhered to and calculated. So when you say you have a shortage of money, in some cases we don't always have to give out money. We can give out forgivenesses, and I'm going to be talking about those things today. This should be an easy opportunity for a group of people to get together and come up with the agenda for the black African American race for the reparation. It would be easy. The bank, as I indicated, is one. Now, there were many universities that contributed and benefited from our slavery, schools and institutions which we could not even attend. Those schools are still benefiting right now. As a matter of fact, some of the universities, I understand, university called Garrett University, also benefited from large donation from the profit of slave trade. Now, as you look at where African Americans are now, if you would compare that to the Caucasian as the net worth, we've already discovered in some cities like New Jersey and different parts of New York, the net worth was very, very low for the African Americans compared to the Caucasian. Our net worth is what we're concerned about. And a few of our actual financial wizards have said, if we don't get some wealth soon, then we're going to be a permanent underclass. And we want to prevent the African American from becoming a permanent underclass. So we got to get some wealth into our hands. And that is what the people want. They want to know that you're not going to genuinely over-the-counter accelerate every individual's pockets, because every individual wasn't damaged. We're talking about the African American in our MyAlpha, and we did have a MyAlpha. It's still questionable about whether or not those numbers were counted of the loss in the Middle Passage. It's still questionable about some of the other people that were extended reparation, what their numbers were. The verdict is not even out of what their numbers were of being slave. However, you can trace the documentation of the actual slave trade, as well as those individuals that were on the ships. There were numbers to account for them, the losses. Now, what we want to also look at is that our children, they don't have any legacies. And that land that we were supposed to be bequeathed, the 40 acres and the $150 was supposed to be monies that we could put down on developing our crops and our land. We have no legacies to leave our children. Our children need some sort of reassurance that they can move into the next generation and be able to survive. they need to have some savings bonds that are extended to them that have some wealth that they will be able to recoup once they're of age. So we are really concerned about the legacy of our children's financial well-being. Do we have any property or any businesses that we can leave behind? Every African American could be given the option of setting up an entrepreneur position under the Small Business Association. You can have the Small Business Association work directly with African Americans to get them established and up on their feet with their own EIN number, their NIAC, their Dun & Bradstreet, and their certificate to do business with the government. We are now going to reap some of that benefit that you owe us by going to the government to ask for contracts, because it was written in that 1865 that because they claim that we didn't get to become a citizen, but at the same time they supposedly have given us our freedom, which meant going back into Jim Crow. So in giving us that ability to have that law in the book, 1865, where big businesses could offer us contracts, this would be the right time for the government to offer us contracts to do business with them, to settle this outstanding balance that's never ending and never stops growing. See, we don't want you to lay down on this topic about reparation, because it must be settled. And it must be settled quickly. I know that there are some indigenous people, some Native Americans in court right now over these treaties that were broken, and they're appealing the cases and opening them back up. Well, guess what? Let me tell you a little story, and I'm going to tell you some stories out of school, because I am a teacher, and teachers do that, especially history teachers. I want to send you back to the war that there were 2 wars back to back, and you're looking at Florida fighting in the war with the Seminole Indians, supporting them, who had come on board to fight with the actual, I guess you would call them the actual Spanish. And the Spanish were also working with the Seminole Indians, and the Native Americans were fighting. And they formalized one of the biggest, largest colonies that there ever was. And the colonies grew into villages and possibly grew into nations. And this war went on for 7 years. And then they came back to fight their enemy again to win a second time. And this war was fought in the Carolinas in the swamp area. And there was a big discussion during that time about the Indians Movement Act, to move Indians out of those areas, to move them down in Orlando and Tampa, Florida. But those lands were swamp areas, and they did not want to go there. But they were told they had that choice to go there, or they could fight the war, and a lot of them would be slaughtered. Now, in the Carolina area was a swamp area with in the Sea Islands. I know a little bit about this story because my uncle told the story about the Seminole Indians and the Creed to me as I was a young child. A lot of the Caucasians walked away from that fight because there were swarms of insects that was causing yellow fever. So on account of the yellow fever, the Seminole Indians and the Creed Indians and the Africans who fought that were slaves, there were a number of slaves who were owned by the Native Americans, and they helped to plant the field and help to turn the soil so that they could grow crop and could teach the Native Americans how to survive in that area. And believe it or not, they had overseers in the Carolina areas that were black, that were overseeing other slaves, because the Caucasians could not go down into the swamps because of the yellow fever that most of them were contracting. So therefore, because that war took place and they fought for 7 years, Seminole Indians fought against the United States, as well as not only the Seminole Indians, the Native Americans, and the slaves. They all fought together. And they eventually became one nation. At one point, they were separating the lower Seminole creeds from the upper Seminole creeds. And each one of them had a different perspective on how they ran their particular colony. However, at one point they came together and united and called themselves the Seminole Indians and became one. And that meant that Africans were also considered Seminoles. But the so-called soldiers from the United States came in and they wanted to separate the Africans from the Native Americans. As a matter of fact, they wanted to put the Africans back in slavery. And the Africans said no. But they gave them a choice. They said, well, you can go out on the forefront and territory and you can use that land, and as long as you stay out there, you're free. Or you could come and be free in the Loretta area. So Africans didn't want to be put back in slavery. So they took the lesser choice of the hard rock and the hard place. But nevertheless, these Seminole Indians fought in a war for 7 years, fighting against the United States Army for their freedom, which they won. You don't hear a lot about Denmark Vesey and the fact that he was a part of this great war. But I'm not going to be able to tell the whole story today, as a storyteller would like to. But what I'm going to say is that the slave men didn't know any. The slaves that broke out of slavery, they eventually became free. So they fought for their freedom, and they had their freedom. And in North Carolina, the story is being told about the Geechees and the Gullah people, which came over from Sierra Leone, from Africa. And still to this day, they go back to Africa for a reunion and celebration of these rice pickers, because a lot of these Africans came from Africa to come to North Carolina to help cultivate the swamp area where the rice was. Rice was a big business. Now, we didn't get any shares of that business as a slave or as a free slave. We didn't get any monies for that. Right now, they're trying to determine if they could steal the land right from up under these Geechee Gullah people who had deeds to their property. They were one of the first Africans that owned deeds to their property. But yet, by hook or crook, the real estate industry was able to steal this land back from these African Geechee people who had the title and deeds to their land, because it was bequeathed to them from their ancestors. And some kind of way, they have stolen quite a bit of land and come in and build up their communities of condominiums, duplexes, and have stolen and swindled the land back from these Geechee Gullah Creek people. We need something done about that. Our history lies there. I know my grandmother was from North Carolina, and her history was there. And we need something done about that land to give it back. And to give it back immediately. Even if they've got property built on it, they need to bequeath it back to those community Gullah people, because now they're fighting in court, trying to show proof that they own the land and that the Caucasians have moved in illegally. It's a whole story on that, and I can't begin to tell you all of it, but there is some funds that could be reimbursed back to those Geechee Gullah people immediately, ASAP. Because when we look at the story of Florida and what really happened, because that was one of the first states that they were going to give the 40 acres and a mule back to. And they were running the test. So they had bequeathed this land and money. So most of Florida and the Tampa area, black slaves were occupying that land until they ran them out and tried to send them down to the swamp area. There's always a trick to something. But those southern states that were going to be lined up for reparation to be handed out to the African Americans needs to continue to be divvied out. We need to own a state. We need to have a certain geographical part of the states that we own and operate, because we cannot use your penal institution because there's no laws that the white man will recognize that the blacks have. No laws. You put it in your documentation and you documented it in your amendments. So it is written, there's no law. So how can we appeal to you in a court of law concerning the laws that are on the book when there's no laws you will respect that a black man owns or has? So I would recommend a separation, and the separation be given to us through those states that we are allocated for to run our own operation, have our own judicial system, our own police force. Then you won't have to determine how you're going to come up with programs that you're going to soon dismantle, that won't work, that will never work. Whenever you have an impartial group of policemen over black people, they're always going to show impartiality. And they're always going to look at the blacks as the criminals. We all have criminalistic behavior. It's not just one race of people. But we can't convince you of that. So therefore, we're going to have to set up our own judicial system and our own security police force, separate and apart in those various different states that you need to look at and allocating to the African American. We need to be separated. Our views are different from your views about how we are to chastise human beings. The physical behavior that these victims are getting in the prison is horrendous. They're maxing out the prison cell, and you're locking people up for low-level violations, and you don't have the necessary heart to be able to divvy out justice and law and order on behalf of the African American. And we've seen it time and time again, and it's not going to change. So the best that you can do is to permit us to have separation of our own judicial system and of our own security police system. That needs to be looked at by a group of committee immediately. It is no two ways about it. Now, reparation is a big fish to fry. It cannot be gulped down in one bite. You got to understand, we are looking at somebody that has ties with your psychological comprehension, that has actually took the Willie Lynch theory and used that particular method to keep us fighting amongst ourselves and even looking in the mirror and turning the gun on ourselves. We got a lot of therapeutic help that we need as a people, but we're going to have to determine who will conduct those sessions. And we're going to have to be the ones to bring consciousness to ourselves and our own, not your therapeutic psychiatric psychiatrist. No. When you would take one of our finest black psychiatrists and put him through the grief that he's been through to determine that he's not capable, I can imagine what you would do to someone who is not as skilled and who is not as credentialed as he was. And I'm not going to get into all the names because I'm not interested in who the names are. But I do know that we have a psychological post-traumatic stress syndrome that needs to be addressed immediately. So therefore, we need to go into ourselves to express this to our own elders and psychological, what do we call them? Setepi. And we don't call them psychiatrists, but setepis, who they can tell things to, and they can get this burden off their mind, and we can get this heavy load off of each and every one of us black individuals who are carrying the weight of the government on their shoulder. Because we have been taxed with everything you can tax us with. And we have had to take the blow of every issue, even when it comes to taxes. We are $2 billion. We have a $2 billion purchasing power, but our net worth is so low. And how do you phantom that when you are spending the most of the money and keeping the circulation of currency? So we've got to do something about this currency. And if you have to divvy out gold to the Africans, I don't mean no alchemy that has no gold to support it, but maybe the gold is what we want to take so that we can start all over again and start fresh. You've dealt us a bad blow. Some of us are so psychologically fragile and damaged. I don't know if we can ever come back. Those that are coming home from the prisons, they are going to need more than just therapy. They're going to need patience, and they're going to need love. Getting on to the prison system. Some kind of way, you're going to have to release those people. You're going to have to release those people, the ones that are illegally in prison, because they have never had their court day. The ones who were locked up for carrying small amounts of cocaine or weed, who are not detrimental to society, you're going to have to let those people go. You can only hold people so long in captivity before that evil that you impose will turn on you and come to visit your household. You can only keep so many people locked away, which some of them could be rehabilitated and they could have went back into the system. Those that owed fines are locked up for owing fines, who had legitimate jobs, who have now lost their jobs. There's so much devilish things that have been done. I don't know how you can repay most of these people back and make them whole. But I do know the ancestors are on the rise today, because there are a lot of groups waking up and they're appealing to the ancestors about their situation and how you got these people bound by the ankles, bound by the wrists, bound in the head. Mentally, you have got them bound. But you know what? Conditions like that don't always persist. When you get enough Africans together in one place, their very chanting will summons the ancestors, like Bookman Dadi, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, Toussaint Louverture did. They summons their ancestors to come and help them. If those prisoners only knew it's not just Islamic faith, it's what's in their Coptic record, to call and to chant for their loved ones to release them and free them. Some of them might already be free in their mental capacity, but they want their physical bodies freed just as well. How can you be afraid of a person and lock them away? Because the prison that you put them in, you better be careful you're not putting yourself in that same imprisonment. So how can you make us whole? How can you make those prisoners whole to feel like they're citizens again? How can you give them their citizenship back? Because you've stolen it. Once they come out of jail, then they do another year, they do another group of time of years in the community. They are marked like a beast where they cannot interwoven themselves back in society to be accepted. They are marked with this indictment for a lifetime. That can be stopped now. When they come out of prison, they should have every right to vote. And they should not be carrying any of these tags on their record that will condemn them when they get a background check and prevent them from going into employment. How can you make a person pay for something twice and punish them? You cannot. So you must rehabilitate them when they come out so that they'll be suited for society and that they can work in society and contribute something back and go back to their families and knit themselves back together again and hope to God that their mental capacity is still stable enough. I know the military men are suffering as if they're in a prison too. So you don't have to be locked up to be in a prison. All you need is to have your mind in the hand of the oppressor. Now, that is why we will have to separate, because the oppressor will try again to get the minds of the victim again in their hands. So we got to think of something better than that. And even just negotiating with you is really out of the question. We should come up with our own plan and hand you what we've come up with. Because there's so much trickery going on in your camp that I feel that whatever plan you agreed to, just like all of the treaties that you bailed out of, and you never fulfill those treaties, what makes us think you are going to fulfill a treaty now? What? Is there anything that we can think of that will make us believe that you will fulfill that treaty now? So, we're looking at a real devastating thing. No one wants to discuss reparation, but as our three branches of political parties, the Democrat, the Republicans, and the Independent, as we look at those three branches, we're no longer worried about which branch we should go with, because they're all the same and they all prove to do nothing for African Americans. This year we're going to have to be very, very cunning in knowing exactly what we are asking these political parties to produce. And number one is going to be reparation. Yes, I know it's a big dog. It's a big dog to put under, but you got to bring this dog down, and you got to be able to break it up and dissect it and tell us exactly what you plan to do for us when it comes to the reparation and how you're going to divvy out the goods. Now, for centuries, the Army has been stockpiling and taking the things that don't belong to them. They started with the Indians, shooting the Indians in the back and ravishing them of all of their belongings, and then telling the world that they did justice by the Native Americans. No, they didn't. So we have a big issue to address when it comes to political parties and who we're going to vote for. We don't have all that kind of money to give no political officer and to put in their pocket. We don't have that kind of money. My question is, do we need a political party? And should we be worried about a political party when we're going to go to the nation to talk about our reparation? The political party better be worried about what we present as our needed substance in the community, and that is to bring our communities back that you've wiped out. Bring our communities back that you've wiped out temporarily, because we got a one-way ticket to get out of here, and you're going to provide it for us, because our communities are torn apart, they're destroyed, and there are no communities to go back to. And in order for us to have a village, we're going to have a community to tap into. And with our communities gone, you knew we could never go back to our communities. And all of that redlining and preventing us from buying property in the white neighborhoods and preventing us from the whites selling to us and putting clauses in the mortgage about how you can't sell to a black person and they can't move to the community. All those things you are going to have to be held accountable for. And if you think about reproducing those things again, we'll know. That's why we're going to ask to be moved away from around this connection. We want our own land and separation. And I know a lot of you blacks are probably frantically right now. Oh, how are we going to do that? We can't go away. We can't do that. We're going to have to think about it. It is a topic for discussion. It is up for discussion, because I can't see no way that this security system that was created for the Caucasian to protect white men in power who own property and slaves. That was the purpose of having the police force. That was the mere purpose. It wasn't created to secure and protect minorities and blacks. No, it wasn't. So that's why you see so many black people locked up, because we've been criminalized by the Caucasian for fear that our people would steal from them and take their goods, because they have stolen from so many people for so many centuries, and different people, not just the slaves, but also from the Native American. That is a big topic that these political parties are going to have to sit down with us at the table. Now, thinking about the taxes, the first thing that you got to think about is forgiving us of any taxes. We should not be paying any more taxes. Our tax paying days should be over and forgiven. How could you leave a people penniless and poor and prevent them from reading for over centuries and tell them to catch up and pull themselves up by the bootstraps? You cannot do that. It will not work. Not even now that we've gotten your degrees. It's still near impossible, because we don't have the money in the bank. We don't have the money set aside. The average person black that's net worth is less than $7 in most of your states. And we don't have the money saved away. Now, we want reparation, and we want it now. And if need be, we want to be on these committees that take it to court to come up with a solution. And we don't want an all-out deficit on these court cases where they last and linger on. We don't want that. We want this to be done swiftly as soon as possible. But we still have our black universities that are near death, who are shutting down and reverting to other universities, never to be a black university again. They are suffering financially. They need money to stay open and keep their curriculums available for those black candidates who are thinking about college. But nevertheless, we have a bigger problem than that. This Colonel report talked about a conspiracy to destroy so many people because we have a shortage of oxygen on the land, and that there's been a conspiracy to destroy as many blacks as you can. Get it out of your mind, get it out of your thought, because all of this ravaging of organs from African American people and preserving their organs, all of this stuff has already come out in the open, and it's going to be discussed and visualized to the African Americans who are not knowledgeable. But the government who might be involved and be participating, they will have to be served notice that that process is not going on. We have enough problem with our African American males being preyed upon to be killed off, let alone the female trafficking and babies trafficking. All of these conspiracies are not conspiracies. They've been going on for centuries, and you've been laughing all the way to the bank. Well, that cannot continue anymore. We're going to have committees to oversee that. And a lot of you African Americans are going to be frightened, and you're going to be ready to give out and give in and go over to the other side, for you fear of what may happen to you. I'm asking you to keep heart and don't break camp. Don't break camp. Because a lot of what is going to be said out there and the threats that are going to be made to you, you're going to want to break camp. But I'm telling you, for your benefit and your family's benefit, do not break camp. On this one, it says we win. This is something like the war that they had with the Seminole Indians. It's going to go on for a while, I know. But the Seminole Indians and the African slave, they endured it for 7 long years. So who are we to say that we cannot endure a war? We are dealing with our spiritual warfare. We are not even dealing with carnal warfare. And it did say in your Bible, in the end, it said in Revelation, we win. I want you all to go and read the last book of Revelation where it says we win. Who is the we that they were talking about? Because God had already said to his helpmate, let us make man in our own image, and we're his chosen people. So he had to have been talking to us that we win. You must know that, ladies and gentlemen, that we win. We're not going to suffer anymore. And this rehabilitation package is going to come into play. You're going to see many individuals coming together talking about this reparation plan. And it's not just going to be that descendant of slaves only. We're going to need a lot of help. Trust me, that group that formed Descendant of Slaves is just one of the groups. They kicked it off. But there are going to be many more groups to follow to support what is going to be done. It's in the atmosphere. It is like Wi-Fi. You can't get away from reparation if you wanted to. I don't care how many times you go into your meetings and you swear that you're going to get rid of these African Americans. You could swear on the Bible for all I care. It is written that we win. And our spirits are coming to visit us now. I had a visitation from 3 of my ancestors, 3 of them. 2 of them I recognize, tall and slender men. First I thought they were coming back for their harmonica, but they brought a dog with them. And I don't know if that dog was a hunting dog or what. And my mama was in the midst of them, with them, wearing that same old white tattered dress. I had talked up the ancestors so much, they literally came in my bedroom to tell me that they were coming back, because there is going to be a war. And black folks, Don't get panicky, because you're not going to have to tote no gun like